I think part of why Kamala is getting so much support is that if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public.
Yes.
And some of those billionaires behind Kamala are terrified of that outcome.
We begin tonight with a Fox News alert. President-elect Donald Trump has
This might explain why the left is losing their minds over this man's upcoming role in the Trump administration.
They're not happy.
They accuse us of every single thing they are doing. They try to imprison our great leader illegally time and time again. They raid our houses of worship. They tell us where our children can go to school and what they should learn. Well, I don't know about you, but I want our future generation to know history, math, and economics. I don't want them to know gender fluidity at the age of 10.
Andrew, I just want to start first with you and just get your reaction to this news tonight.
Yeah, well, it's a terrible development for the men and women of the FBI and also for the nation that depends on a highly functioning, professional, independent Federal Bureau of Investigation. The fact that Kash Patel is profoundly unqualified for this job is not even like a matter for debate. So I think what we should really be thinking about right now is what does this signal in terms of Donald Trump's intent for the FBI? The installation, or the nomination, I guess we should say at this point, of Kash Patel as FBI director can only possibly be a plan to disrupt, to dismantle, to distract the FBI, and to possibly use it as a tool for the president's political agenda. And, as an organization, we know what that looks like. This country has been there before, right? The pre-Watergate FBI, the J. Edgar Hoover FBI, struck fear in the hearts of Americans across the spectrum of politicians, people in entertainment, people in the civil rights community, because the director operated at the direction of presidents to collect political intelligence and to utilize the legal authorities, the investigative authorities of the FBI to terrorize and intimidate Americans. So the question is that where we're going back to with this nomination? I would argue that Kash Patel would be the perfect person for Donald Trump to nominate if that's in fact his intent for the FBI.
Okay, so I hear you saying you are a yes, and yet a lot of folks have raised questions about whether Patel is qualified. President-elect Trump floated the idea of Patel as his deputy FBI director at the end of his first term. His attorney general at the time, Bill Barr, rejected the idea, later writing this in his memoir, quote, Patel had virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency. Senator, how seriously do you take Barr's warnings?
Listen, I think you should have the Biden administration look at itself. What is the qualification of Tony Blinken to become Secretary of State? Well, he organized 51 so-called intelligence experts to put together a fake letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. That must have qualified him to be Secretary of State. President Trump is entitled to name his appointees. That is exactly what he's doing, and I'm going to support this appointment. Kash has worked in national security. He's worked at the Department of Justice. And he's somebody that has been willing to uncover the wrongs at the FBI. He's the one that uncovered for the American public what happened with Russiagate. He's the one that can see through the fix here.
So, Senator, you are disregarding what Bill Barr, the former attorney general under Donald Trump, is saying. His warnings that he just doesn't have the experience.
I'm saying there are people that are serving in the current administration that are woefully inexperienced. I think Kash does have relevant experience, particularly when it comes to the mandate the American public have assigned of turning these agencies around that have become completely corrupted. Kash has pointed it out. He's probably the best at uncovering what's happened at the FBI, and I look forward to seeing him taking it apart.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
that is part of why we have this corrupt media. You could go to Wikipedia and find Operation
Patel, the former chief of staff of the DOD. So why is the former number 2 guy at the FBI, Andrew McCabe, freaking out on cable news? Let's watch.
Yeah, well, it's a terrible development for the men and women of the FBI and also for the nation that depends on a highly functioning, professional, independent Federal Bureau of Investigation. The fact that Kash Patel is profoundly unqualified for this job is not even like a matter for debate. So I think what we should really be thinking about right now is what does this signal in terms of Donald Trump's intent for.
It signifies that you're in trouble, deep trouble. You and the entire deep state. Oh, yeah. This is a guy who's going to come in and he's not messing around. I've interviewed Kash a lot of times. Here's one of the times from last year that I interviewed him, and I talked to him about Merrick Garland, the head of the DOJ, the Attorney General, pretending like he didn't know who was in the crowd at January 6th. He was asked how many FBI agents or federal agents were involved in that crowd that was rioting at the Capitol on January 6th. And he stopped. He said, I don't know if there were or weren't any, which really screwed him up because he does know. He knows if there were or if there weren't any. So Massey said, did you just perjure yourself? Did you just tell us that you sit here before us not knowing whether there were or weren't? Well, let me rephrase it, he said. And then he tried to rephrase his way out of it. Kash, is there any doubt that there were federal agents in that crowd?
None. And talk about government gangsters of the first order. Merrick Garland and Chris Wray are the top 2 culprits, and that they're destroying our system of justice and creating a 2-tier one. Look, we now know without any equivocation, there was a dozen minimum federal sources, paid informants, and the FBI's former director of the D.C. field office came out and admitted they lost track of them. Right. The FBI lost track of the informants they had on the job for the D.C. Capitol riot scheme, and they lost them, and were supposed to be paying them. On top of that, Joe, they admitted they had 24 undercover federal agents on site. Chris Wray and Merrick Garland have lied to the world and Congress about this repeatedly. They, of course, know the answers to that. They're quarterbacking those cases in that investigation single-handedly. And Congress should bring Merrick Garland up on contempt of charges for lying yet again. But for some reason, we don't want to take his money. We don't want to take some of his funding. We're going to let him continue to lie and continue to rig elections and continue to destroy our system of justice.
For those who don't know, the Attorney General is the boss of the Department of Justice. Is there any way, shape, or form he can squirm out of this and say, I just didn't know? He would have to have known, right? Or if he didn't know, Kash, after he's asked the first time months ago, doesn't he go back to his department and say, all right, tell me who was there? It'd be easy for him to find out, right?
That's exactly what happens. He calls the director of the FBI who works for him and says, hey, Chris Wray, how many informants do we have there? How much money are we spending there? How is it that we didn't know who was there working for the FBI and we lost them?
So what are your thoughts about this selection of Kash Patel? I think it's masterful.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book.
FBI.
But who? That is, I mean, there's...
Oh, that's under direct control of the director of the FBI. Just like the manifesto from the Nashville school shooting of the Catholic school. Yeah. We still haven't seen that, right? It's not the Nashville police or PD saying we don't want this out. The FBI airmailed into that operation and said this is not getting out. Because they do that because this is another government gangster operation. All these local law enforcement communities get funding from the DOJ and FBI for local programs. And if you don't cooperate, you're not getting your $1 million for this, and you're not getting and that's a lot of money to these local districts. That's how they play the game. That's why you don't have a Black Book. Or the
but the Black Book, it's not just sitting. I mean, that's Hoover power times 10.
And to me, that's a thing I think President Trump should run on. On day one, roll out the Black Book. And not just that. On day one, roll out all of the text messaging communications we were told were deleted. On day one, play the rest of the video of the pipe bomber. On day, one of the reforms I talk about in government gangsters is you need a central node to be continuously declassifying. This is another thing they do. They overclassify. And I'm telling you, as a former number 2 in the IC, they overclassify 50% of the stuff there to protect the deep state. Oh no, you can't see that. Nothing to see here. Gina was a master at it, of doing it. And we still haven't seen half of the Russiagate report that we wrote. still under lock and key, on how the ICA was originally constructed. We put 10,000 man-hours against John Brennan's team that did it, and we found out why they came up with their bogus conclusion. But we couldn't sell it to the world because we couldn't talk about it, and the government gangsters came in and buried it. All of these things, there needs to be a continuing central power, whether it's the White House or offsite, that says every request that comes in, just right out the door, as long as it's not a major threat to national security.